Markert. I'm your presenter for today, trying to give you a short talk, sort of an introductory thing on bandings. I'm a retired mechanical engineer, so some of the things that you might hear me say, you'll scratch your head about and say, why the heck is he doing that? And that might answer that question. Been a lifetime woodworker. Over the years, I'd have to say that I was more of a woodsmith worker than, say, a fine furniture woodworker. But when I decided to retire, one of the things I decided to do was to focus more on period reproduction furniture. To that end, I joined the Peach State SAFM group here in Atlanta, which I'd highly recommend to all of you, and started learning from people who had been doing it all their lives. And it's been a tremendous resource for me. Guess I'm happy to share what I know about bandings, but you know, I'm not an expert. I've learned a lot over the last few years. Most of that has been from other people, both within SAFM and others. And I was born in Decatur, lived most of my life in Atlanta, and now have retired to Greensboro, Georgia. So I'm down here in the lake in my new shop doing mostly period furniture of different types. And like I say, I'm enjoying myself. And hopefully I've got a little bit of knowledge that I can pass on to you that'll get you involved in bandings and show you that it's really not rocket science. It's way easier than that. We're going to start off and do an initial glue up of some of the thicker pieces in our apron banding. First, I want to show you the assembly board that I've got made up. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but as you can see, it's just a melanite board with a tape-wrapped board attached to it to provide a straight edge. I've got a series of different blocks that I use on the end in order to butt up the pieces of the banding, the units of the banding that are going to be worked. I've got a 45 degree, a 60 degree, and a 30 degree, and this is just spun around for this basis. When we get to it, I'll just need a 90 degree. So the way I glue up different pieces of bandings is basically start from basic cores. I've called this core 1. This is a fairly simple banding as we've discussed early on, but I think you'll find that everything that I'm showing you here is pretty much a basic way to do bandings that you essentially just do over and over again. As I mentioned, I use multiple glues for this banding. Just regular yellow glue is fine. I found that this simple veneer glue roller works great. A little bit more of a pain to keep clean, but it works really well. So this particular banding, and we're going to be working with 3 different shades of our internal work, but this particular one is satinwood and holly, which then will get captured by 2 thin sheets of satinwood on either side, and then it'll get finished up. But in order to get our internal pattern from our first core, we need to take these 2 pieces, which, as we've seen, we've sliced on our table saw, and if I remember right, they're 5/32 thick, which matches the width that we're ultimately going to cut the pattern out. So basically, you just take your yellow glue, apply it liberally. You don't want a huge amount of squeeze out as you work through, but you also want to make sure that it's fully coated. Keeping in mind that this is a banding, it's not a chair or a chest of drawers. None of this glue work is structural, if you will. So it doesn't need a tremendous amount, but it does need to be covered. So as we come through, again, using our glue roller, trying to keep from getting glue all over the place. And then we basically take 2 pieces, put them side to side. In this case, we're just doing the two pieces. Now, one important thing to do, and you can do this ahead of time, a lot of times, it'll save you time if you've got multiple pieces to come together, is you want to take just some simple Scotch tape, take some long enough pieces that you can go around the pack that you're making up. It's always good to put the ends over so you've got an easy place to grab hold of it once you're pulling it apart. And then the purpose of that is to take whatever you're gluing up and put your tape on it and tape it so that when you put it in your banding press and apply pressure to it, that the two pieces don't slide and come out of registration with one another. Typically, as I mentioned, my banding press is 24 inches long. You can make it whatever length you want. I found that that's worked out pretty well for me. And then in 24 inches, I used 3 bits of tape. If it was shorter, I wouldn't need 3. And again, you just want to make sure you keep everything nice and registered together and doing that. So now you've got it together, everything's aligned, good coating of glue, it's not dripping out. And then we're going to move over to our veneer press. As I mentioned before, you know, it's just a simple U-shaped. The interior is covered with tape so the glue doesn't stick to it. And you'll find that it comes together like so. First camping black again has got tape on it, so glue doesn't stick. You pull that together. This is just basically a glued up couple of pieces of straight wood that I put in there in order to help distribute the pressure back and forth. Interesting thing here is you can see that I've got some blocks that hold the press up so that I can slide my clamps underneath it. Those are useful for that reason, but they're also useful if, and we'll see this later on as we're working on through this banding, if you're working with a narrower piece, you can set your support blocks to tell you where the banding is so you know where to put your clamps. So I basically use these Bessie clamps that I have to do this. Put that all together, start off just lightly clamping it up. Notice I'm kind of alternating them back and forth. I don't really know why, but supposedly that's supposed to make the world go better. The end clamps here go on, so we end up with something that is pretty significantly clamped. I will, at this point in time, double check, make sure, okay, nothing's really slipped side to side. My clamping blocks are properly over the thing, go through, tighten it up, and then what we'll do in about 20-25 minutes, we'll come back, pop the banding out, pull the tape off, make sure nothing's really shifted around, and then flip it around and reclamp it for another 20 minutes. Then we can free up the banding press. Okay, now that we've had our glue up in the banding press for about 20-25 minutes, what we can do is unclamp it and pull it out. Now you can see that we've got some nice squeeze out everywhere, and we'll come in and we'll take our tape off and get it out of the way. Again, you can see how handy it is to have a nice little nib that you can grab hold of, or end that you can grab hold of. And typically at this point I'll come back and just lightly make sure that I've gotten most of the squeeze out knocked off or scraped off. These are not going to be 100% in register because they will move around a little bit even with the tape, but that's okay. All right. Now, at this point I'll take it and just pop it back in the banding press again. And if you ask me the question, why are you doing that? You know, in a 15-20 minute time frame and things have moved on you significantly, you might stand a chance to be able to re-register stuff. So that's probably, I think, the main reason for it. And we come back, put it back in the banding press, again for another 15-20 minutes, just to give it glue about 40-45 minutes to firmly grab and set, and then you know you're going to be with that. So we'll come back to this again in about 20 minutes. All right, so we've had another 20 minutes. Now it's time to pop our first core out and call it it glued. But I also want to show you something that I do that I found that's very important, I guess, with this, and I'll come back to it several times, I'm sure, is that now I've got this and I'm happy with the glue up, and it's been in the banding press long enough that the glue has, while not fully dried, is certainly cured and given a good solid hold. So I don't have to worry about it going anywhere. But one of the things I have found from experience is that, you know, because there's glue in this line, and there may be multiple lines as you go through the banding, there's water that you've introduced to one side of these two pieces of wood. And you can have a problem with it bowing or even cupping. Even this thicker stuff can cup as it dries because of that. So I've found that one of the things that is most important that I always do is I utilize my workbench, and I'll come along and with another piece of straight wood that I have that I've also got tape on just so I don't end up gluing a banding to it, is I'll take bandings in various processes and even finished bandings, and I will come along and then clamp them to my workbench when I'm not working with them. And I can then come back, even if I don't come back to this particular step days from now, I'll still have it clamped to the workbench, and as it slowly dries, it won't cup or bow on me. It's been an important thing for me to learn because you can see this is a start to a banding that I made years ago actually, and I didn't know that then, and there's a significant cup in it, which makes working with the pieces problematic. So this is a good tip. I didn't get that from Latta, but that's a good tip to know because it saved me from having significant problems in the past. We need to do our thicker slice for the banding that we're working on. And in this instance, I've got my primary material made up of, this is holly. And for the different colors that we'll see inside, we'll have multiples of these, as I showed you before. So it's really fairly simple and straightforward to set up, but it is a little daunting sometimes when people are trying to slice thin things. Like I say, anywhere from about an 1/8 inch up in thickness, I'll pretty much use a table saw. Below that, we'll go to the band saw. So, of course, first things, as in all things, we need to set our table saw, and luckily I've got mine fairly well adjusted so that I can use the scale and do this. As I mentioned before, we're looking at 5/32, just a little bit over 1/8 of an inch thick slices that we need. Then, of course, we need to come in and set our height. Here, let me caution you, like always, you need enough of the blade exposed, but not too exposed. Those of you that know me know that I stuck my hand in my table saw a couple of years ago, which led me to buy this new saw stop because I didn't want to stick my hand in my table saw again. Luckily, I didn't use any fingers, but I still have a lot of nerve damage that I have to deal with, so I always take real care when you're working with this. Next thing I do is I'll set up a feather board so that I can firmly hold a piece of wood to my fence, and I don't have to worry about doing that. And then as I described when I was talking about tools, I've got a series of these basically just simple rectangular pieces of MDF. You'll notice this one's labeled 1/8, and you can see there's the groove from the saw blade, so it actually protects, or safety keeps that blade being buried. And then there's a little tab on the end. You need to keep an eye out because those tabs have a tendency, if you wiggle, to get sawn off. And then you just saw it and turn it into another piece. But I have different widths that I use, and I find that that keeps it safe. You want the length of this to be pretty much the length of what you're sawing. That keeps you from having this blade exposed. Gives you something to work with. The featherboard keeps everything loose. So you've taken something that could inherently be fairly unsafe, and that I'm sawing a very thin piece that could get trapped and shoot out and create other problems, and keeping it well under control. I have always been a habit, and it's probably one of the few things that I really do safety-wise that I do just out of sheer habit over 50 years of doing it. When I work with a table saw, I always wear my safety shield. I do that because, you know, when I've worked with my table saw in the past, I've had things kick back. And I don't mind bruises in different places, but I do want to keep my eyes going. So I will kick this off, and we'll show you how this process works. So you see, you can use that process, and quite safely, quite uniformly, you can saw off pieces that are the correct size for your bandings. Bandings don't need to be terribly precise from a dimensional standpoint, but they do need to be terribly consistent. As you build up bits and pieces for bandings, if you're even, 2, 3, 5 thousandths off on thicknesses, as you build up bits and pieces, and we'll talk about this a little more later, you can run into problems of your banding wanting to run off in a curve, or you see ripples in it and that sort of thing. So precision is important, exact dimensions, other than if you're cutting something, you want them to line up one to the other so that they're the same. And again, we'll see how that plays out as we continue to build a banding. Okay, what we want to talk about now, and what I want to show you, is how I slice the thin veneers, or the thin sections. This particular banding has got a piece of veneer that's supposedly, based on the design, to be a 64th, and another thin slice that's a 32nd. In actuality, as I played with it, I actually moved the thicknesses up a little bit because I like to look at the banding a little bit better with the thicker pieces. So how I do things below 1/8 of an inch is I move over to my bandsaw, and I utilize a device that's called an AccuSlice. I mentioned that earlier and gave you the website. So the AccuSlice is a tool that I found that can give me a really remarkable accuracy, even on my old cheap Delta 14-inch 30-year-old bandsaw. So the first thing we need to do is to mount the wood onto the AccuSlice. And I do that pretty simply with just some double-sided sticky tape. And the double-sided sticky tape of choice that I like, that I use when I'm carving or doing other things, is actually this double-sided duct tape. So, even in this kind of a thing, duct tape, I guess, rules the world. What we do is we take our AccuSlice, basically get it lined up on our table, and then tape side down, bring it in place, and stick it on. I will typically take a clamp and just give it a good squeeze, where I can to make sure that it's well and truly stuck. This is a replaceable board on the AccuSlice. It's just a piece of MDF that's been varnished and shellacked up so that it's nice and slick. What you do next is that you come through and loosen the overall slide and bring it up to the blade to where it's just touching or not quite. Then you lock that down. And now the first thing you have to do is to make a truing cut so that you end up with a good parallel plane on your piece to the track that your wood rides on. So you've got a circular veneer gauge that's basically graduated in thousandths of an inch. I know from experience that it's about 50 thousandths kerf, so if I cut a little bit deeper than that, I should be able to come through and cut a strip off, and we'll make that first truing cut. The surface that I get out of it is certainly good enough for gluing and banding. You end up with a little nib on the end right at the last part of your cut. So I usually just take a little 150 grit sandpaper on a block. And then on my normal strips, you know, I'll hit it 4 or 5 times, come back, hit it another 4 or 5 times to knock any potential high ridges off. You know, do that on both sides. It'll have saw marks as we go through. And then you have a thin strip ready to go. You know, the main question I get asked about the AccuSlice more often than not is people immediately say, well, how do you deal with blade drift on your bandsaw? The reality is if you position your blade properly, by properly, you know, if you've got the teeth of your blade close to the crown of your wheels, if not on it, your blade is going to track fairly straight from that. And as long as when you go through with your kerf as your blade cuts, as long as your blade's not touching one side or the other, the back side of the blade's not touching one side or the other, you won't get any drift at all using this thing. And typically in a piece like this, you might have 2 or 3 thousandths of an inch difference in thickness once you've got it lined up and you start from your second truing cut on. Okay, so we've got our 2 5/32 strips, 2 inch by 24 inch strips glued together. And now it's time to make this into what I call Core 1A, which is basically to take this, divide it into 4 pieces, and then glue those together. That will be a core that will allow us to then make the units, or the little small strips that will cut off, that in turn will end up making the, I guess, checkerboard like pattern that you'd see. And to do that on the table saw, I utilize this sled that I have made up that was set up for use with my thin kerf blade that I discussed before. It's a 5/64 thick kerf blade. That's a 10-inch blade that I get from it's a Woodworker 2 ultra narrow kerf blade from Forest Blades that I use. I've gotten to where I pretty much use, not exclusively, but most of any new blade that I buy from Forest. First thing I need to do very simply is just come in and figure out how to cut this first in half. 24 inches, 12 inches. Sleds in general, this particular one, I used to make them all this way. This is an older sled that I've got. You see, I've made the rails out of different types of wood, and I found you can buy 3/8 inch bar pretty cheaply and do that if it doesn't daunt you to cut the metal. Drilled and tapped it for some nylon set screws that I use to get any of the wobble out. So I'm using the saw kerf in my sled to basically come through and make this first cut this in half. Now I just need to come in and do the same thing. We need to cut this in half. Cut it in half. Now what I want to do is to make sure that I have things that are pretty much the same length. And in order to do that, I'm going to go over to my chop saw. All right, so I want to take the shorter piece here, and with my chop saw, just come up and make a simple stop block, clamp that in place. Now I can cut everything so that all of my pieces will be the same length. And now what we can do with these is, you can see as you alternate them and glue those together, you'll end up with your alternating bands for your banding, and you've got a piece that here is about 1.25 inches, if I recall, or close to it, so that you come through, and as you slice this off at 90 degrees, you end up with your individual units that you use then to build up your banding. Okay, and let's talk about how we do that. Okay, so now we've got our different pieces. We come in again just like we did with the long piece, and we start spreading our glue. Then of course we want to alternate dark light, dark light. Like I may have mentioned earlier, the demonstration that I'm doing is actually I'm making 3 different bandings. All of the bandings are the same, except that the darker color wood is different one to the other. This one, the first one that we glued up was satin wood and holly. And this banding is holly and Gabon ebony. All the way to the edges. Okay. Now, and just like the initial core, we now come back and get our tape, and it's even more important here because of the multiple levels that you have. So we've taken our 24-inch initial core, which was just the 2 pieces that were 5/32 in width, and we glued them together to make now one basically 6-inch piece that we've got. Put this in our banding press. As I mentioned before, part of the magic of these supports is you can set them so that I now know when I put my clamps on where the end of my banding is. Use the same long pieces. You can see how it slid inside, which is not good. I need to get it back square. I need to take more care, get it up against one side of my banding press because it doesn't fit completely tightly inside. There we go. And then make sure that we're centered over the top again. Okay, and like the other initial just 2-ply core that we pulled together, give us about 20-25 minutes, pop it out, double check it, make sure it hadn't slid. We can fix it then if need be, and then clamp it back for another 20-25 minutes, and we end up with our total of 45 minutes, and the glue will be nice and tight then, and then we can move on with it. But one of the things that I then do with that 6-inch core is I'll make up another piece of wood that's essentially the same size, and I'll end glue that so that, as I'll show you when I'm slicing, I've got a place for my hand to be that's not right next to the blade. So the final process of this will be simply take it out, true up the end, probably on the chop saw, more than likely. So that's the quickest way to do it. And then plane the sides so that I've got a nice straight side of that core. And then we'll be able to glue this on and then move on to the next step. Okay, there are times when you can certainly get the material that you need in terms of a regular veneer, especially for the smaller sheets. This is actually some black dyed pear that I have that's right at a 32nd in width, so it gets used quite often directly in that. But I wanted to show you how with the veneers, what were some of the best or the easiest ways to take it to a point. Again, just like your big solid pieces, you're sizing it to fit in your veneer press, in my case, the 2 inches by 24 inches. So I do it that way. And there's several different ways that you can work with this to actually carry it through and make veneers. First thing you do is to set the length. Well, the magic comes is get out your tape measure, your ruler, measure your 24 inches and cut it. Or, you can take, if you have your pre-made material already, just set it in place and bingo, you've got it marked. A lot of times you can utilize different things. I like to put my bench to use. I built this bench back in the late 80s, so it's been around for a while, and there was a time I wouldn't cut on it, but that time is probably 15 or 20 years in the past. You can just score the veneer, and it should, if you've scored it deeply enough, be able to just pop it loose. So one way that's a good way to cut veneers is to use a veneer slicer and a slicing board. You'll see this is just basically a simple piece of MDF with a little fence that's been attached to it in order for the veneer to register against. You can put the veneer in place, trying to pay a little attention to the grain because that makes life easier. And then use this veneer slicer. This is one of the Lata veneer tools that you can buy from Lee Nielsen and pay a lot of money for. And I do use it, I recommend it. You can come in, set it, in this instance right at 2 inches, clamp it down. Has a nice little steel stop. I like to have it off the edge where you can rotate it through, place for your fingers, come through. And you're not trying to cut all the way through, you're just trying to lightly score the veneer as you go through. Do that all the way down. Don't go all the way through, flip it over, come back from the other side. Or, if you have a nice surface like I do that I don't mind cutting on and you have your other pieces already put together, you can can come in and just utilize them as a good way to cut your veneer out. And now you have a section set up for the next part of your banding. And you can pull out as many of those as you want. Typically what I do when I'm making bandings is I'll make all the pieces before I start gluing up the banding. Even the more complicated ones, I'll have the stack of all the materials there. So anyway, if you're working with veneers and bandings, which is fairly common, then that's the way to do that. Now, if you have thin veneers, like you can usually buy today at 1/24 or even smaller than a 32nd, 20,000th inch thick or what have you, and you need a wider thing. If you look closely at a lot of bandings, you'll see where they've stacked veneers on top of one another that are the same color to make a wider stripe. So you can do that. I've found that for the most part, I will rarely cut a black strip out of ebony, just because ebony is so dadgum expensive. I'll use this black beaded pair, and you can't really tell the difference that much, if at all, when you've got them glued up and glued together, because you get a good solid black out of this, and the stuff's glued. The good veneer that you buy that's dyed is colors all the way through the thickness. What we need to do now is take the 6-inch long core 1A that we made up and then slice it. You can see this particular one's already had some slicing done on it, but I'll demonstrate how it's done. And to do that, I utilize, again, back my 90-degree sled that's set up for my thin curved blade. Unlike before, when we were just cutting things in half with it, I've got a stop system that we need to use. It's actually made up of two pieces. There's a lower stop, which slides at the bottom of the sled, and then there's an upper little square stop that's got some sticky-sided sandpaper on it that rides on top of that L. And then what we need to do is to come in and to set our width of what we want to slice. Now, I know that with this blade, I can come in with my rule and get pretty close to what I want to be by lining that up to the edge where the saw kerf is. And then I come in and I push my bottom stop, a little L-shaped bottom stop, up against my piece. That puts me where I want to register. I take my top stop with a screw towards the bottom stop and put it in place. And then I come back with a clamp, and I clamp that top stop, or top piece of my dual piece stop together, and clamp it so that everything, my bottom stop will slide back and forth. And if I've done everything correctly, then where this stops gives me the piece that I want. Now, I recommend that, as always, you have a test cut where you come through and double check that what you have is what you want. And also, I wanted to mention is when you push this through, one of the advantages to this sliding stop is you can get it back out of the way. If you leave it where it traps that piece against the blade, you can guarantee that your little piece is going to get mangled and get thrown around the room rather than laying over. So once you've got that done, you can come back, make your measurements with either a scale or probably better with a caliper. Say, okay, that's a little too narrow. And then I come back, I'll hit it. It's too narrow. I need to bring that a little further away, so I rotate my screw a little bit. It moves my stop out. Then I come in and can make. So now what I do is I go through, and it's just, rinse and repeat. Keep cutting the units that you're going to end up making your overall banding out of as they come together. And we'll move on to that step next. Okay, now what we need to do is to take the units that we've sliced. These are holly and paduk, and turn that in to our overall banding. So you can see I've got my assembly board out again. What we need to do first is take some genuine official woodworking packing tape and get us a longer than 2 foot length, and try not to get it together, lay it out somewhat flat. Take some good old-fashioned painter's tape, just grab the end of that, and I need to take the sticky side up of this tape laid out on my assembly board, and I want to take it and align it, get some of the dust off, align it to my straight edge so it's not crumpled up, and then use the painter's tape to stick that down flat. I take one of my blocks that I used to push against, I guess you'd call them a push block, just use a simple hand clamp to get that in at 90 degrees. And now it's time to start assembling this core. So I take my individual units and I try to give them a look, because it's important a lot of times that I've done a little sanding to knock any nibs and burrs off, and I place those, push them down on sticky tape so they stick down. Then I take the next one, make sure I have it aligned up color-wise so that I'm alternating colors. And also one of the things I do is I try and rotate it typically 90 degrees. And I'll have in this instance, I've got a smooth side and a rough side, so I use that to index the two sides. So here I've got my smooth side against my fence, my rough side is out. I want to rotate this one so that my rough side is towards the end and my smooth side is out. The reason for that alternation is that even if I only have 1, 2, 5 thousandths of an inch difference between the thickness of one side of this to the other side, if I put them all in the same, by the time I get down to the end, I'll have a pronounced angle in some of the last units and it won't work out. So if I'm taking them and alternating them, there I've got the rough side out, rough side in, and you want to make sure you push it up tight before you stick it down. This goes in, okay. Some glue on my fingers. Now, okay, oops, got to get it the right way. Again, got to get it so you alternate colors. And I found it always is good when you get to the end to go back and double check and make sure you haven't messed them up, because I found I am fully capable of doing anything like that. So this is just a simple rinse and repeat. Sure everything's tight. This banding needs, with as I guess we did the calculations earlier on when we had our math slide, needs about 20 of these units, give or take. And just as a double check, take one of our faces. Okay, looks like we need another one. There we go. There we are. Now we've got the right length that we've got there. Now we want to make sure that's well and truly stuck down. Take my old J roller for laminates, give it a roll, stuck down. Now what I can do is take that loose, take that loose. So now that we've got this all stuck down to our double-sided sticky tape, we just need to come back, cut the ends of that away. This out of the way. And now what we need to do is to come up with a new core. See how this likes to come undone. But if it comes undone, it's no big thing. You just stick it back down. Got a good place to lay up here. And what we want to do is to make our initial sandwich, our new core, where we're going to face these units that we've made, what I call my Core 1A units, that we made from the Core 1. You know, when you're an engineer, people all around you have to suffer for that. So you do that. But we're going to lay that up where this is going to get bound by the tape on one side and then a glued on sheet here. So in order to do that, we need to use a nice little syringe. I bought a whole bunch of these at one time. And use that because we'll want to come in and work ourselves along and put a little glue in between in order to glue those surfaces together. Again, not a lot. It's not structural. It's what we're going to do. And then, like we've done with the other pieces, we'll apply a layer of glue to this and a layer of glue to this, put it together, and go to our banding press with it. Okay, so now let's glue this up. So we'll come along with our, too much. Too much is better than not enough. Just a little bit between here. And sometimes if you're working with something more complicated, you can, before you get to the end of this, start seeing problems where the glue is making the wood swell, and you might need to glue this up in stages, but we shouldn't have a problem with this simple one. And you can see how when we glued that intermediate core up into a 6-inch long piece from just a simple 2 pieces glued together, how much that helped rather than come in. I remember the first time I looked at a banding that was much finer than this, and I said, God, look at all those little tiny pieces. How did they put those little tiny pieces together? Well, how they put them together was they took thin veneers and they glued a whole bunch of them together and then they sliced them off. So that's the way to go. So now we come through just like we did before. Want it on both sides. Now again, as I've said, you should probably be prepared and do this ahead of time so that these would be sitting here at this stage, ready for you to go. The thin veneer, you can see that's even trying to raise. It will definitely react to into that moisture. So now we've got that taped, registered in place. We take it to our banding press. So as I've said before, we need to clamp this up, come back, take a look at it, 15, 20 minutes. Pull the tape off and put it back in again. So what I want to show now is just a quick, simple demo of how I slice off the bandings for the veneers, for the final packs that I end up with. This particular pack is actually a cuff banding that I made a few years ago that I do need a few pieces of, so I figured I'd kill two birds with one stone and do this demonstration and actually do it with this while our final assembly banding is currently still in the banding press. So essentially it's a sort of rinse and repeat like we cut the thin sheets veneer for the bandings before when we were working with a sheet of, with a piece of holly. So I've got some double-sided sticky tape. We place that on our bandsaw, make sure it's flush with the table. Again, this first cut is going to be a truing cut, and then a second cut we can then start regulating the thickness of the banding and make it be pretty much whatever you want. I'll typically cut bandings at either a 32nd, occasionally up to a 16th, but usually a 32nd or less. You know, let's see, 30 seconds, 30 thousandths, so 25 to 30 thousandths would be what I'd be looking, of an inch would be what I would be looking for. Now you can see a completed banding. This is fairly thick, it's probably close to a 16th in this initial cut, but now you can dial in to whatever size thickness that you want. Typically in a cuff banding, 25, 30 thousandths of an inch is plenty thick to do, and that will give you higher yield off of your banding pack. It's what you're always looking for, trying to maximize the inches. Again, the finish is sufficient that you can, glue it straight away or just hit it lightly with 150 grit like I did before. So once you're, we'll deal with the banding that we're making once it's fully dry and able to slice it off like this. Okay, now we've had about 25 minutes, give or take, on our initial glue up of our Core 1A, or our glued units, and an initial face. So let's pull that from the banding press. And I think it should be far enough along that we can move on to, yeah, that looks good. Move on to final finish up, glue up. So let's move back to our assembly table, our assembly board. John Champion will get a kick out of seeing this because I know I bought this one for the same reason he bought his. And he'll have to share that joke with you. You can see how, when I'm talking about, you can see how that's bowed already from the moisture on one side. So we've got to fix that. The next thing we've got to do is take our packing tape off. We've got to get that started. That could have been much worse. Now we want to take our dark sides and then our two white sides. Now, we could just glue this up with one side, go ahead, put it in our banding press, then come back later and glue other places. And in more complicated bandings, that's not a uncommon thing to do. But I think we're only going to put 3 pieces in, so I think we can deal with this all together and go straight to our final finish, our final assembly. So again, we're rinse and repeat. So you can see, even with this small amount of glue, as I mentioned before when I was talking about clamping cores down to the workbench, you're actually introducing a heck of a lot of moisture into a fairly small volume of wood. Now we move back to our banding press. Get this squunched in good and flat. Same sort of rinse and repeat. Give it 20, 25 minutes in the clamp. Maybe a little longer since we've got the multiple pieces there. And yeah, everything looks good. We'll have a finished banding to pull out. Okay, it's been about 20, 25 minutes, so let's take a quick look, see how we're doing. Hopefully we've cured some of that big bow that we had. Though in all honesty, none of that will truly go away until the banding completely dries. And to do that, we need to, there we go, that's better. So now we can, let's get our tape off first. It's always interesting with some wood colors. Some of them are water soluble, like this Paduk. You can see how the glue's turned pink in there. Some of them are alcohol soluble. Mavenge I found is that way. You put it in alcohol and you'll end up with a nice yellow dyed alcohol. And some of them I've found, I've got some veneer softener. I don't know what chemicals are in the veneer softener, but it'll bleach the color out of most any wood. So let's clean this excess glue off the sides. So you can see, even with the relatively thin films we were putting on there, there was enough there that we ended up with a fair amount of squeeze out, because we had the 3 layers, if you will, of glue put in there. Try and clean a little of that glue off of an edge. Yeah, that's coming off. That's how that banding would look with that piece of mahogany next to it, to give you a feel for it and doing that. What you need to do with this now is, I want to put it back in the banding press and keep it there a bit longer. It's still wanting to be a little springy, and I'm going to keep it there for, I don't know, probably, since it's got that much glue, another hour or 2, and then I'll take it out of the banding press and I'll transmit it or transfer it back over to, like, I have this center core where I've got it clamped on the desk. And I'll leave it clamped up on the workbench, not my desk, on the workbench, I may leave it clamped up for several days, maybe even a week. Just give it time to dry. Maybe it's, you know, every day I'll come in and flip it over or something, you know, just to give it different changes. I'll move from the tape side once the glue is good and dry. You know, I've got tape on the opposite side of this. I'll pull it over and I'll flip over the wood side. Give a place for the moisture to go. Want it to dry out while it's clamped down. So, you know, just through these edges, there's not a lot of surface. So you need to find a way. And that will keep it, you know, that'll keep this bow will go away. It won't be there. Once you've got it all done, you've had it clamped on the bench for a few days or a week, however long, it's gotten completely dry. Like you could tell, and like I told you, it's not, even with the tape and the other things you've done, it's not completely registered. All the layers be sliding a little bit with one another, hopefully not much. And you've got to true that up. And the easiest way to do that, simply just plane it. An older banding that I did back in 2007. You can see it's a similar theme, but a little different. It's just got alternating black and white, ebony, and I don't think actually this ebony. I think this is actually built up pear. Use either a block plane, smoothing plane, and I've even had some people use these things for, you know, decorative, you know, and decorative. So that's how you would clean up the one we've just glued up. But you need to wait until it's pretty thoroughly dry and good and flat, and then you can take that to the Acu slice if you have one. If you don't have one, I mean, there are ways to do the same slicing on the table saw. You know, essentially you can slice off easily 16th inch wide bandings using the same method that we were slicing the bigger blocks to get the 2-inch wide strips up to an 1/8 of an inch. You know, you can slice down to a 1/16 of an inch surely with that method, and on your table saw, you might could get even smaller slices than that. You don't want to use. My advice would be, is I know I have not successfully used an outside stop with a blade in here to cut repetitive pieces. You don't end up with the consistent thickness that you'd want, as opposed to trapping it against the fence with the blade here. Now, you may not be comfortable in running something that tightly against your nice fancy fence. You may want to make a sacrificial fence and use that to do it. But that's the ways you would slice it and clean it up. Or like I showed you, or like we do it on the Acu slice and cut a banding. So it gives you a bunch of different ways of doing things. And like I hopefully have said repeatedly, none of this is anything that I've discovered. Nearly much all the knowledge I have from banding comes from Steve Latta. I recommend that you get his DVDs, and it's something that I refer to over and over again when the time comes, when I'm scratching my head trying to figure out how to do something. Bandings can be really, really a lot of fun to do. So they're the types of things that I highly recommend you give a try to. They're not really hard. It takes a little bit of tooling that you may come up with, or may have to make on your own, and the tools you have in your shop you can work through and come up with something to really dress up the the furniture that you might make, get you into doing a lot of federal period furniture or Victorian furniture or whatever you may see that wants to have some really nice augmentation and decoration on it.